order the special meeting of the Metropolitan Council for Wednesday, November 30th, 2020. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, we can move on. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from the November 9th meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wolf. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. At this point in the meeting, members of the public who wish to address the council on matters not on the agenda may do so. Do we have anyone registered tonight?
No.
Okay. All right. See if anyone in the audience. All right. With that, next, moving on to our business item, the first one is the 2022-280 joint same week item, which is the fourth quarter budget amendment. Turn it over to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is business item 2022-280. It's a joint item. It's not same week. Just so everyone knows, we didn't have quorum and management today, but we can take this right to the council because it is on the agenda. And we do have Stewart McMullan here should anyone have any questions on this item. The 2022 fourth quarter budget amendment makes changes to the operating budget in environmental services, MTS, Metro Transit, and community development. The proposed amendment was reviewed and approved by the Environmental Services Committee on November 8th, the Community Development Committee on November 21st, and the Transportation Committee on November 28th. In environmental services, the amendment adds $3.825 million in revenue, of which $3.2 million are additional fee revenue and $625,000 are state appropriations for water efficiency grants. It also adds $7.9 million in expense authority for inflationary increases needed for chemicals, utilities, materials, and supplies. In community development, the amendment adds $250,000 in federal revenue and expense authority for the Metro HRA for pass-through administrative fee payments. In MTS, the amendment adds $1.8 million in expense authority for the increased cost of recently negotiated service provider contracts and the increased price of diesel fuel. In Metro Transit, the amendment adds $5.7 million in federal pandemic revenue for light rail, which will be partially offset by a credit to our local partners. Correspondingly, it adds $172,000 in federal pandemic funds for commuter rail, which again will be partially offset by a credit to our local partners. In both instances, these revenues will support payroll and operational expenses consistent with the terms of the federal grants. So, Madam Chair, the motion is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2022 unified budget as amended and in accordance with the attached tables and in the reports that we had all received in advance.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Any questions or comments? All right, seeing and hearing none. Bridget, can you call the roll, please?
Johnson.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Zarin.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Vento.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye. Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
That the motion carries. Thank you. Our next order of business is approval of the consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Lindstrom. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the items on consent are adopted. Next, we'll hear from standing committees. Community Development has reports on the consent agenda. We have no reports from the Environmental Committee, and the Management Committee also has reports on consent. So we're moving over to the Transportation Committee and turning to Councilmember Chambliss.
Madam Chair, council members, business item number 2022-277, same week, is regarding the procurement of shelters for Metro B line stations. In summary, arterial BRT stations feature a signature shelter to provide a comfortable customer experience. They provide lighting, heating, and protection from the elements. They are also equipped with security cameras and emergency telephones to contribute to a safe waiting environment for customers. This purchase would make use of the council's existing shelter contract to obtain the shelter's need for B-line stations. This contract was competitively procured and executed in 2021, similar to how the council procures buses. This contract was structured with an initial base order plus options to purchase more shelters within a 5-year period. OEEO set a DBE goal of 9% on the original shelter contract. At the time of the award, OEEO determined that the awarded vendor met the DBE requirements for the contract. For the current proposed option on the existing contract, OEEO determined that the vendor continues to meet the DBE requirements for the contract. The proposed motion, therefore, Madam Chair, I move that the council authorize the regional administrator to exercise an option on existing contract 19P385B with Duo Guard Industries, Inc. for the fabrication and delivery of 43 bus rapid transit shelters for the installation of Metro B-Line project in an amount not to exceed $1,460,070.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. We have two other items for other business tonight. We'll begin with business item 2022-311, which is regarding appointment of candidates for the Private Property Inflow and Infiltration Grant Program Task Force, and for Councilmember Wendy Wolf to be chair of the task force. Thank you very much for stepping up to do that. Also to allow staff to identify replacements of roster members in the event a member can no longer serve on the task force for unforeseen services. Inflow and infiltration are terms that describe stormwater runoff and groundwater that makes its way into sanitary sewer pipes and eventually gets treated unnecessarily at wastewater treatment plants. Inflow is clear water that enters the water system through rains, leaders, sump pumps, or foundation drains that are illegally connected to sewer lines. The largest amount of inflow occurs during heavy rainstorms. Infiltration is groundwater that seeps into cracked or broken wastewater pipes. The Metropolitan Council has previously convened task forces to work with regional communities to address inflow and infiltration. The last task force met in 2016 and made 8 recommendations, one of which was support efforts to secure funding for public and private I&I mitigation projects, including state bond and clean water legacy funds. Consider the provision of financial assistance through regional sources, such as a portion of the wastewater fee, to provide assistance to communities for private I&I mitigation. With the update to Statute 471.342, the Metropolitan Council is now allowed to provide financial assistance through communities to private owners for I&I mitigation activities. It is now appropriate to establish and convene a 4th task force that will be tasked with designing a private property I&I mitigation grant program and reviewing peak hour factors used to develop I&I goals. Therefore, I move that the Metropolitan Council approve the following appointments to the Private Property Inflow and Infiltration Grant Program Task Force, for Councilmember Wolf to be the chair of the task force and to give staff the ability to identify replacement members as needed. The proposed members of the work group are as outlined in your business item. With that, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Lindstrom. Is there any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And thank you, Councilmember Wolf, for stepping up to do that. It's very important work. All right, for the second item of business, I'll introduce Charles Carlson, who's the Director of MTS Services, to come up and present.
Just backing up to business item 2022-280. If you all look on your iPads, we had included in the link only the environmental piece of the budget item. But what you all passed and intended to pass and was available on the table and in paper form was the entire budget amendment, including the transportation piece, the management piece, the CDC piece, environmental piece. So just to clarify, Bridget, we will need to update the website to include the complete business item that was available to you all. You were able to look at it, and it's available on the table for people that are here for the meeting. So I just wanted
Nope.
to,
Thank you very much for the clarification. We
Yep.
appreciate it.
thank you, sorry to interrupt.
No problem. That gave Charles time to come up and get up. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charles Carlson, Executive Director, MTS. Business item 2022-315 relates to the council's process to plan for and implement transitway projects in the region. The proposed policy establishes a framework for how the council will advance transitway projects, including through our planning role as the region's MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, managing the region's long-range transportation plans, and through our role implementing and operating transitway projects as the region's largest transit agency, Metro Transit. So as it relates to planning, the policy largely reflects existing practices. Information is required of project sponsors for the council's consideration in adopting projects into the plan. Adopting this council policy formalizes longstanding practice and specifies and clarifies key areas of information that the council requires. This aspect of the policy will be documented in a proposed modification to the 2040 TPP, planned to come for the council for consideration in the first quarter of 2023. As it relates to implementation, the policy will help ensure the council identifies and manages project and system level risks, makes informed decisions when advancing transitway projects, and identifies funding commitments for ongoing operations and maintenance of projects. These responsibilities will be further developed in procedures that implement the policy. This item was presented as an information item and discussed at the Transportation Committee meeting on November 14th. Yesterday, we received a comment letter from the city of Minneapolis that was provided to you, was printed for the meeting, and is also posted with agenda materials online. With that introduction, Madam Chair, the proposed action is that the council adopt the policy RF17 Transitway Development, prepare a proposed modification to the Transportation Policy Plan to incorporate this policy in the plan, and to direct staff to develop procedures to implement the policy. And Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Director Carlson? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2022-315.
Motion to, second.
Moved by Councilmember Johnson, seconded by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion?
Madam Chair,
Councilmember Johnson?
I just want to thank Charles and the team for bringing this forward to the council. I think it's really important. I think it's really incumbent on us right now to take a look at this process. I think it's responsible, it's transparent, and it's a solid process. I think it clarifies partnership roles, including our own. And I think it ensures a deliberative and predetermined point where we can take a look and evaluate risks. So overall, I think this is a really great policy that we're enacting, and I think it will serve the region well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, appreciate that. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Cummings was unable to be with us tonight, and she did have some comments, so I'm going to read her comments. Fellow council members, I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person tonight. I've asked Councilmember Barber to share my thoughts with you regarding the Transitway Advancement Policy. Since our time together on November 14th when the policy was introduced, I have had time to reflect on our conversation as well as receive positive feedback from other policymakers around the metro area. I would like to share that this policy provides us with the thoughtful care needed to ensure transitway investments are planned, designed, constructed, operated, and maintained in a thoughtful manner. As a former mayor, I know transit investments can transform a community and the residents and businesses that rely on world-class transportation investments to move jobs, educational opportunities, and to dynamic destinations. I think together as a region, we can manage the risks and challenges that come with long-term, multi-million transportation projects for everyone's benefit. As planning and transportation leaders, I believe that this policy is a thoughtful step in that direction for us as a council. With that, please know I support approving the Transitway Advancement Policy and look forward to our next steps. Sincerely, Molly Cummings, District 5, Acting Chair, Metropolitan Council. And I'll put out one more call if there were any additional questions or comments. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thanks to the staff and to my colleagues for the opportunity to be on the work group. I don't serve on the Transportation Committee, but because of the district that I represent, I've gotten pretty steeped in issues related to BRT. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to express the concerns that I have gathered up in the last 3.5 years in watching the process. And I want to note that equity is always a really important part of the work we do, most especially racial equity, but there's also geographic equity. And I want to make sure that those of us who live east of the river can, going forward, do what we can to make sure that the East Metro area is at the table and getting what the communities and the counties in the East Metro area need as it relates to transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? I just have a quick one, I do want to thank all of the people that have participated. I really want to thank council members for their really good, robust discussion at our Transportation Committee. All of the contribution, I think, has really helped us shape this into what is a really high-quality policy. Just some remarks in general is, and I talked about this at the Transportation Committee as well, is when the Metropolitan Council develops these Transitway projects, the region is really committing to significant capital investments with associated risks, including the long-term operating and maintenance. As a result, we need to carefully consider these risks before advancing projects on projects and investments of this magnitude. I think what we've done here is create that framework that we can make these decisions in thoughtful, considerate manner, make sure we're mitigating risks along the way and really doing the right thing for the region. So if there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, we are done. That is the end of our business tonight. However, we do have 3 information items. The first information item is the Metro D-Line opening, and we have Katie Roth here to present. Welcome. Oh, and Bruce Howard, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and council members. I'm Katie Roth, Director of Arterial BRT. I will kick things off today, but then we'll hand things over to my colleagues Jonathan Ahn and Bruce Howard, who will introduce themselves and speak to the operations transition and the opening day activities we have planned for December 3rd, this Saturday. But to kick things off, I'm really excited to be here to talk about the D-Line. In 2014, the council identified that the D-Line would be the arterial BRT upgrade to Route 5. And we began planning and pursuing funding for this line at that point. So 8 years later, we're getting ready to launch service on Saturday, December 3rd. So I want to talk a little bit about the riders who are going to benefit from this investment. This is, as you know, a high-demand corridor with many riders who are going to benefit from the faster, reliable, and comfortable service that we're delivering with the D-Line. As of this fall, ridership on Route 5 was near 60% of its pre-pandemic level and has been consistently growing. And this route alone makes up a very high percentage of Metro Transit bus ridership. So 8% of all Metro Transit bus rides happen on Route 5, or every 1 in 12, which, as we think about those customers transitioning to the D-Line, is a pretty cool place to start when we're thinking about making that BRT improvement for our customers. We see this high ridership because 120,000 people live along Route 5 and make all kinds of trips to jobs, schools, destinations along this 18-mile corridor. And many of those folks choose transit for their trips already. In this corridor, 1 in 4 households doesn't have a car, which makes delivering high-quality transit even more critical. With the D-Line, we're investing in making transit a faster and more reliable choice in this corridor for our current and for our future riders. When we've launched similar BRT service on the A-Line and the C-Line, we've seen 30% growth in ridership following those launches, and we're hopeful that the D-Line follows that pattern in the weeks and months to come. And by adding a new and significant link in the Metro network, this line will also make that network more important and more useful for people to access opportunity across the region. So one way, of course, the D-Line is different from the A and C lines is that it's going to open in December instead of June. And we've gotten many questions about why that's the case. The short answer is that it's twice as long as those other corridors and construction takes time. But I did want to highlight a few things that we've collaborated with partners on and that we're delivering for our customers with this 18-mile corridor. Since April of last year, our project contractors have constructed 61 brand new D-Line platforms and installed shelters, adding 246 new heaters and 230 security cameras for our customers' comfort and safety. In partnership with Corridor Cities and with Hennepin County, the D-Line project striped 78 new pedestrian crosswalks and constructed 80 ADA-accessible pedestrian ramps. We rebuilt or upgraded 24 traffic signals, in part to enable 64 total intersections along the corridor that can provide extra green time for buses using transit signal priority. And we tied it all together with 22 miles of underground fiber optic cable, which ensures reliable network communications between all of those components and our control center back at Metro Transit. Next, I'd like to recap the service plan that customers can expect starting on Saturday. As you know, because arterial BRT lines largely replace local bus service, they don't significantly increase the number of operators needed to provide the service, which is especially critical right now. And also, our Service Development Department, as you know, is constantly evaluating staffing needs and has worked very hard in this particular case to plan for this new service in a way that only requires 9 additional operators above what Route 5 requires today. D-Line service levels are going to be very similar to the C-Line, with trips running every 10 minutes at the busiest times of day, every 12 minutes at many other times, and 15 minutes in the early morning and late, or 15 to 20 minutes in the early morning and later evening. Route 5 will run hourly to provide that local service between stations, and both services will operate from before 5 a.m. until after 1 a.m. D-Line service will also replace other services on other routes on the corridor, some of which have been suspended since the start of the pandemic. Overall, with the D-Line starting on Saturday, our customers will see more service on weekdays and significantly more service on Saturdays and Sundays, as well as experience the convenience and simplicity of every trip running the entire length of that line from Brooklyn Center to Mall of America. As we get ready to launch service, I'm very pleased to share that not only will the line open on time, but it will also be delivered under budget. And the D-Line project benefited from a favorable market for construction when our major contracts were awarded in 2020. And through solid design, good management from our construction services team, and very few unanticipated conditions in the field, we've had minimal contingency draws across the past 2 years. There are 3 stations that will be constructed after the D-Line opens in partnership with other roadway projects, and we'll be keeping funding in the project budget for those stations. So as such, a final project cost is not yet known as that work continues, and we'll continue advancing that $75 million project budget. But starting next year, through the quarterly budget amendment process, we do anticipate a phased release of contingency to other arterial BRT projects. I want to highlight that partnerships were also really key to gaining construction cost and schedule efficiencies and minimizing impacts while maximizing overall improvements in the corridor. We constructed nearly $7 million worth of local improvements along with the D-Line, namely in the form of street improvements like additional ADA corners, pedestrian bump outs, signal upgrades, as well as fiber optic connectivity partnerships. The City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and the City of Bloomington all brought funding into this corridor to maximize the benefit of construction taking place with the D-Line. And in addition, 6 of our platforms were constructed by other projects led by Hennepin County, including those that are shown in this photo at the corner of 44th Avenue and Penn Avenue North in North Minneapolis. So to wrap up before I hand things over, I hope you'll all be out on Saturday. I look forward to seeing many of you in the corridor, and you can see all of these stations firsthand, but I wanted to share just a few highlights. This is the northbound station at Emerson and Plymouth Avenue on the north side, where some of our very earliest coordination on the project with the City of Minneapolis took place and led to that left side bikeway that you can see being implemented in a way that would minimize conflicts between bikes and buses in this corridor. So really starting the framework early for success between multiple modes. This is an image of the bus lane being painted on Chicago Avenue just north of Lake Street. You can see the Chicago Lake Transit Center in the background there. We worked with the City of Minneapolis here to reposition and expand an existing bus lane and modify a traffic signal as well to maximize that transit benefit near the transit center. So D-Line customers will enjoy that full priority in this 1,200-foot stretch, as well as in the existing bus lanes on 7th Street in downtown Minneapolis. This is a photo of the Chicago and 52nd Street station. Very similar to the stations on the A line and the C line, our stations on the D line will be well lit and provide that secure environment with security cameras and emergency telephones. And in this image, you can also see that lit railing, not to be confused with the light rail, I've been told, that delineates the platform from the sidewalk behind it. And finally, this image on American Boulevard shows an enhanced pedestrian crosswalk, which was funded by the city of Bloomington and built with the D-Line project that'll make it easier for transit customers and all pedestrians to cross busy American Boulevard to reach the Walmart, which is a major destination on the corridor, and other destinations near Chicago Avenue. So again, I look forward to seeing many of you on Saturday and invite you to check out all of the ways that we're going to make riding a lot easier in the D-Line corridor.
Thank you, Katie, and then thank you everyone for having me today. Again, my name is Jonathan Ahn. I'm a project manager for BRT operation, representing bus operations for Metro Transit today. Just wanted to share a little bit of details and behind-the-scene efforts that we've been doing as the D-Line construction op-ramps and then slows down, and as we enter operational phase. Excuse me. So we've been hosting D-Line implementation meetings as an internal venue for staff for different disciplines, and including operations and constructions and many other departments within Metro Transit to coordinate and collaborate on anything D-Line related to lead to transitions from the project-led constructions effort to welcome D-Line into our growing network of family of services. Also within street operations, we also assign assistant managers and street supervisors, eyes on the streets and boots on the ground, assigned dedicated for BRT operations, so we'll be ready from day one, from this Saturday. From this spring and this fall, we've been also conducting extensive pre-revenue testing from runtime maneuverability to make sure that our schedules are developed in a reasonable manner, that we can actually keep the promises that we're making to the customers, and how all the systems, not just the stations, but also the information that are displayed to our operators and to the passengers are accurate and working as intended. And as Katie said, we have numbers of intersections that are reconfigured and constructed that gives transit priority signals to make sure that those are all well integrated to our existing system and ready for those. In addition to checking amenities at all the D-Line stations, you can see from all the photo, we use our D-Line testing buses to dock our buses and use the ADA ramp deployed at every single stations and platform to make sure that those are all ready to go from day one. In addition to those, to make sure that all those operational aspects of D-Lines are ready, some of the new materials, including the D-Line specific and Model American Transit Station specific, our operating procedures are developed. And using those newly developed materials, we, as of last week, we trained over 100 bus operators going through D-Line specific route training, so we will be smooth from day one. And in addition to those, there are a lot of fleet movements. This is a newer service to our Haywood Garage. So Haywood Garage's bus bays are reconfigured to accommodate new buses coming into our system. And you probably, if you ride the Route 5 or other related routes right now, you may see those on the street right alerts in downtown, and along the Route 5 corridors already been developed and deployed, so we should be ready to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Bruce Howard, Director of Marketing and Transit Information. We're going to wrap up our presentation this afternoon with an overview of the opening weekend events, a little bit about the marketing campaign. So as Katie mentioned, service will get underway on Saturday a little bit after 4 a.m. With about 15-minute frequency, moving to 10-minute frequency during the most of the day. So we'll have lots of service out there. That's the good news. People are going to be able to get up and down the line. At 10 a.m. Saturday, there'll be a ribbon cutting and remarks at the Mall of America Transit Station, which you see here in the photo. And the good news on that is we're inside. If any of you were at the Orange Line opening last year, you know we were outside, and it was a bit chilly by the time we got through with all of the speakers. But we'll be inside. I believe Councilmember Cummings is going to host, and we'll have speakers from our partners there as well. Now, following that ribbon cutting, there's going to be a special dignitary D-Line bus ride, and that'll leave around 11 a.m. We're going to head out to the 2 community celebrations, so if you're interested in going and haven't RSVP'd, be just helpful to let us know that you're interested in getting on that that bus there. But two community events. One will be in Richfield at Veterans Park around 66th and Portland. And the other will be up Juxtaposition Arts in North Minneapolis, Emerson, and West Broadway. So lots of activities going on there. They are going to be outside. There are tents, though, so hopefully be a little bit warmer there. We're going to have partner tables. We're going to have entertainment concessions. Rumor has it that our mascot, Skip Traffic, will be there as well. So if you want to get your picture taken with Skip, you can do that. And really want to have a special thanks to HDR, who was our partner on the D-line. They are actually organizing and coordinating these community events, so they're doing a really great job helping us out with that. And again, these events will be from 10 to 1 p.m. Now, we hope everyone will come out, ride the D-line over the weekend. Check out the new buses, some of the amenities that Katie talked about, just fantastic service that we're looking forward to, and all the rides, Saturday, Sunday, will be free, and also the first weekday, Monday, it'll be free. So come out and enjoy, check out the D-line. We'll have staff out as ambassadors helping out on the buses on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then on Tuesday, it'll be the first day of fares collected, and so again, we'll have some staff out at the stations helping out with that as well. And finally, a little bit about our creative theme and the marketing effort here. So what you see is a couple examples. Our creative theme for the launch of the D-line is Miles of Smiles, coming December 3rd. And you can see on the right side of the screen there, that's a poster that we've been putting up in the corridor and other places. At the bottom of the screen is a bus side, again with that same theme. Now, you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, Bruce, I get the D-line, I get the capital D here, but what are those colons in front of the D? Well, if you're someone who texts a lot, you'll understand that when you hit colon, capital D, and send that, it's essentially like sending a little smiling emoji. So it was a nice way for us to kind of reinforce this message about miles of smiles coming to the corridor. We have launched the campaign, as I mentioned. Things are underway. We're using a lot of our owned assets here, as I mentioned, bus sides, shelters, our digital screens. Social media began this week as well. And of course, we have information out on metrotransit.org/D-line. We also have purchased some media, and just to give you a quick rundown on that, we'll have a couple digital billboards in the corridor rotating through some of those digital billboard ads, banner ads on some of the websites around town, such as Star Tribune. We'll be in some community newspapers. We have purchased a few radio spots. For example, we're working KMOJ, which of course is adult contemporary in North Minneapolis, and so we'll have a little bit of radio airtime on that. And then geofencing, and I'll take a minute here maybe and just explain what that is for those of you who don't know what that is. Really, this is location-based marketing. So an app or other software program uses Wi-Fi, GPS, cellular data to trigger a marketing message, such as an email, a text, an ad on social media, when you enter that geofenced area. So we're doing this up and down the corridor, and really looking forward to getting the message out that way as well. And then finally, just want to mention, if you are coming out, and as Katie said, hopefully we'll see you there on Saturday, but I was told to just pass this along that there's not going to be any reserve parking at Mall of America. You can certainly park there, but we weren't able to secure any reserve parking. So people had a concern, maybe it's going to be busy with the holiday shopping going on there. A couple ideas, of course, take the D-line out to Mall of America or other transit, or you can park at 30th Avenue Park and Ride, which of course is just one stop away, and then hop the blue line and come over that way if you don't want to be in the parking mess out there at Mall of America that might be happening. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you all. Are there questions or comments? All right, just very excited for this. Hope to see some of my fellow council members out there this weekend. It is going to be chilly, but we do have the option of the mall, which is a fantastic, and the transit station is very lovely if you haven't had a chance to be there yet. So, all right, thank you all.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Next, we're on to our second information item, which is the 2050 Regional Development Guide update, and we have Michael Larson. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Michael Larson, as you know, planning analyst in the Community Development Division. And I'm here again to discuss the development of a working statement of values and vision and goals for the 2050 Regional Development Guide. After getting your feedback today, I will return in December and January to the Committee of the Whole to continue this work with you. So I have some goals for us today. One is to review the process to date and the next steps that we will take. Review and discuss 3 cross-cutting regional issues that we've identified from our engagement with you and other stakeholders. Review value themes from various discussions that could form the basis of a statement of regional values for our work. We'll identify considerations that we'll use to help build the regional vision and get your feedback on that. And in general, just obtain your reaction, feedback, and suggestions, including for our subsequent engagement next month and in January. So this slide is really reiterates that we've had considerable engagement internally and with our advisory groups this year. It also represents our intention to broaden our engagement as we move into the first quarters of 2023. In particular, we're very excited about the Young Leaders Regional Vision and Policy Collaboration. My colleague Darcy Vendegrift will share an update with you following my presentation, so look forward to hearing about that detail. So the first part of 2023, where we will turn the regional vision into shared goals. And as we begin various policy development discussions with stakeholder groups, we'll have an opportunity to further reflect and refine on this overarching vision and work. So one of the challenges I think that we've discussed in the past of identifying a shared vision for the region is that we could identify any number of important issues as well as opportunities. Oftentimes they're interrelated and they're of varying degrees of importance depending on the stakeholders that we're talking to. We think it's valuable to name a limited set of obvious cross-cutting issues to guide our work. And this is based on the common themes that have emerged by engaging you as well as stakeholder groups. Issues related to equity, climate, and natural systems come up frequently. And these are issues that really relate and cross-cut all of our work. And shared regional priorities and shared goals could arise from these. Obviously, equity is a frequent topic of discussion, and as we have some of the worst racial disparities in the nation. Climate is another obvious issue that we are addressing, and I won't belabor this point as you have had, I'm sure, significant conversations on this issue, and will have been working soon to adopt the Council's Climate Action Plan. And third, natural systems are what sustain and enhance life in our region and its economy. Includes elements like our regional parks and our water systems. Finally, I will just say that these are not necessarily the only possible cross-cutting issues. Though we think they do capture the nature of the engagement that we've had to date. Staff have discussed public health as a potential cross-cutting issue. I propose approaching the issue a little differently, and and I'll discuss that later in the presentation. But I do want your feedback and your direction on that idea that's coming from the organization. So I want to explore, discuss briefly how these cross-cutting issues could inform 4 major policy areas for the 2050 Regional Development Guide. Related to the orderly and economical development of the region that we're charged with. In terms of equity, we might consider how much, and where development occurs in the region, and how that limits or improves access and affordability for the region's residents and communities. In terms of climate, the characteristics, and accessibility of development. I'm sorry, I'm losing my place here. So in terms of equity, we can consider the accessibility and the affordability of development. In terms of climate, the characteristics and accessibility of development have impacts on greenhouse gas production and or mitigation.
This can also be said for development's impacts on natural systems. Redevelopment, for example, might help actually restore the environment, and greenfield development on the edge could occur in such a way that would minimize harm. So in terms of transportation, given the connection between transportation and land use, we have similar issues related to accessibility and affordability, depending on the infrastructure and services that we have as a region and we're able to provide. Obviously, greenhouse gas from transportation, the vulnerability of transportation systems to climate change, and the design and the use of right-of-way and infrastructure also have impacts on natural systems. In terms of water resources, obviously these are natural systems that are impacted by physical development, our use of water resources, as well as climate change affecting weather and the amount and duration of rainfall events. The accessibility of water resources is something that we have probably taken for granted as a region, but we have currently we have supply, quality, and contamination issues that are obviously front and center for us today. In terms of parks and open space for the region, again, accessibility and affordability are issues. Inequities related to open space access has been a subject of research for the council, and especially in terms of our regional park system. While the regional park and trail system is a natural resource-based system, we also consider the equity and climate considerations related to local environmental quality, as well as things such as overall regional tree canopy, which can provide critical relief from excessive temperatures for our region's residents. Now, Madam Chair, I would just like to pause now before I proceed to see if there are any questions or comments that you might have for me, or suggestions.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, the one I was looking at some of your stakeholder groups, and the one that I think is glaring when we talk about equity is we don't have the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee on, as far as there, and if there's to get some feedback from that group, I think it would be helpful in that then.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments?
Ready for me to proceed? Very good. So, excuse me, with the support and review of our colleagues, we will be drafting a set of values for the 2050 Regional Development Guide based on the input we've received and what you've shared to date. This will be work that informs our vision statement. We are proposing the value statements will strongly reflect equity principles. We will acknowledge the past harm that has occurred to communities, seek to repair that harm and restore trust with communities, and involve those harmed as partners in the future of our region. We will also propose that our values will reflect the importance of collaborative and innovative leadership, including with our partner agencies and organizations, and including those who may experiment and take risks in terms of advancing the quality of the region. And we'll also propose that our values reflect an openness in ways that ensure that we are effective and able to course correct if we're not being effective. Finally, we're proposing that our values are grounded in the reality that resources, including financial resources, physical, capital resources, and natural resources, are limited and should be protected for future generations to come. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to pause again now and ask the council members if these sets of value terms make sense, and if they have any feedback, including ideas or terms that they would expect to see included in a draft statement of values.
Thank you. All right, comments from council members? Oh, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you for putting this together and asking us for our feedback. I think, you know, the areas that we want to address based on our core beliefs and values are very open, very courageous. In terms of the transparency, effectiveness, and accountability, that accountability has a lot of key points underneath it. I think measurement is really important, measurement over time, and you know, following up on actions is also a part of accountability. So if we're able to see that and then track it over time, I think that will be very helpful in tracking our progress towards our goals.
Very good, thank you.
Any additional comments? I think it seems like we're pretty content that there's a pretty good
That's
starting
good.
list and a good framework to move forward with.
All right, sounds good.
This group's never shy if they
I
have
appreciate
comments, so.
that, yeah, certainly in the past, I've really appreciated that. Yeah, okay, that was my question for you. Okay, so vision is what we want to achieve for the region. So I'd like to now talk about the development of this regional vision, what it should include and the approach we'll take. First, the region would identify would consider how to integrate these cross-cutting issues that we discussed earlier, ensuring that they're woven throughout. If it's these three or some other set. I've made jokes that, maybe it should be a prime number somewhere under 11, but, these three are pretty powerful. Maybe we want to add something else, and certainly I appreciate your direction on that. So second, regional vision will obviously address regional growth issues, regional development issues, growth management, housing needs, the needs of commerce and industry in terms of development, parks and open space development, preservation, and the wide variety of water resources and integrated water resources that we have as a region. We're also responsible for regional systems that are integral in how we manage the orderly and economical development of the region. So we'll integrate aspects of those systems, which include transportation, wastewater, and regional parks. Fourth, I'm proposing a set of contextual issues to weave in as appropriate, which have been the subject of ongoing conversations, both internally and externally, and they include, I've mentioned this many times previously in this presentation, accessibility and affordability, shared economic prosperity, public health, safety and well-being, and welcoming. So as I mentioned earlier, some staff see public health or public safety as potential regional cross-cutting issues or priorities. So I just want to dwell a little bit on that idea. So public health has generally been outside of the domain of the council, but others really discuss the fundamental public health role that, for example, our wastewater treatment system plays in our work in ensuring the quality and sustainability in partnership of our various water resources. Public safety comes up, and that can be a kind of a hot button issue. So whether we're talking about crime, violence, or in our region, public safety issues in that sense, as well as like the safety and security of people on our transportation systems, whether it's traffic accidents or fatalities and injuries, that's an area of concern. What I am proposing this sort of term, public health, safety, and well-being, is sort of an overarching concept that kind of pulls together sort of quality of life that individuals or communities might experience. So that is something that I'd like your feedback on, whether this issue is contextual or if it's something that really should be elevated. So we'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about a couple other things. So we will obviously keep in mind the following work that informed the vision. It'll be grounded in those values. We are familiar with the particular visions that are reflected in individual communities' comprehensive plans. We've had, again, a lot of advisory committee engagement, and we will also consult the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee as well. Various staff engagements, staff working groups. We're discussing various scenarios about the future of the region, whether or not we have more or less growth, whether that growth is more concentrated or more spread out. And we're setting up this document to be a working document that as we get future stakeholder engagement on various topics, there will be opportunities to circle back and reflect. And finally, I'm kind of using this term here, that anchor, to ensure that we're not so abstract in the language that we use for our vision, but that we're frequently referring to the people and the communities of the region, including the places that are important to them. So I don't know, anchored seemed to be a good way to describe that, and that's come up. Like let's not have this be esoteric, but something that really people can connect to. So again, Madam Chair, I'd like to pause and ask the council members if they have any feedback or suggestions for what should be reflected in the vision. You know, I will go back and review what you've said previously at previous meetings, the work of the input of other groups. Will provide summaries of that information for you to consider. But I would especially like to hear from you now what things should not be missed or alternatively it should receive special emphasis.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael, I'd like to suggest that the public health, safety, and well-being be considered a cross-cutting issue, particularly as we come out of COVID. I think we've learned a lot about the impact that a health crisis can have on a whole state, a whole country, and the whole world. And I can't think of any committee or division within the Met Council where public health, safety, and well-being aren't important factors. The public safety and well-being has been a big issue as it relates to BRT in my district. Public health, like I said, COVID. So I would suggest that it should be a cross-cutting issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Additional comments? Councilmember Sterner?
Yeah, this was what Councilmember Vento said was like perfect. And the only thing I'd say, even like the parks is part of that, the health of that. So like how she said, cross-cutting everything, it's so important because if we get our people out to enjoy the parks and the clean air and water and the trees and it's safe for them to recreate, that's also key. So that's really a good contextual issue that cuts across. So I think that's well done.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the changes and the improvements that we want to make and that are reflected on this vision. And I think that one thing that we perhaps need to stress is that we need to make these changes permanent and unchangeable. I mean, we're not going to get more land, right? We're not going to get any more water. We're not going to get any more untouched landscapes here in the state and in the region. We have what we have. So if we're thinking that we want to protect what we have, then we need to do it in a way that 50 years from now, it will be very difficult to go back. Just like Minnesota 100 years ago had way more forests and areas ready for development, but that's gone. So we can never recoup what is lost. So the changes that we do now need to be as hard to unchange as the damage that we're trying to solve by taking these steps. I mean, climate change is not going to change back. Land is not going to grow again. Forests are not going to grow again. So try to make anything as hard to untangle as possible. I hope that I'm saying this right.
Appreciate that.
Don't screw up.
Yes.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I think that's really good to stress in looking at our core beliefs and values. I think that really does fall under stewardship, sustainability, and resilience. So how we define that and how we accomplish that and how we secure those things that are valuable to us, our resources. You know, if we can make sure that that is seen beyond just the values, that would be good.
Yeah, thank you. All right, additional comments? I'm just going to follow on something to Councilmember Vento's point. I actually, in my notes too, had a similar thing really relative to public health of moving it over. When you look at some of these things, we just had a climate work group this morning. One of the things we talk about a lot is environmental justice. And we're looking at measuring air quality through different communities that have different levels of transit service. So I think this goes across many of our divisions a lot. Maybe more so than we thought previously, especially when we reflect back on what happened during the pandemic. But I think it covers more things than just something like a pandemic. There were a lot of elements that affect people's health and well-being. And then my last comment or question, I guess, was on the contextual issues of the last statement of just welcoming. It feels like it needs more than just welcoming, like welcoming and inclusive, or, I mean, what are we intending with the word welcoming?
Well, Chair Barber, that's certainly a good suggestion to think about inclusion, but I'm really looking for your input into what you all think about what that might mean. I think it does mean many different things, or could, and I'm curious to know what your take on it is.
Chair.
Councilmember Chambliss?
Yes, I think that for some reason, welcoming, triggers in my mind window dressing. Let's make it pretty at the entrance, but inclusive kind of takes it another step further. So I think welcoming is like within inclusiveness. So and I think it's more clear and takes us to that next deeper level. So I would almost want to kind of replace that word welcoming to inclusion.
Thank you.
Or inclusive.
Councilmember Sterner?
I guess I like the word welcoming, but I also like inclusive, so I would not like try to take one out of there, because I think of this song that's like, all are welcome in this place kind of thing, and to me, welcoming is more of a warm feeling kind of thing, while inclusive is more like a number that we're all equal, we're all together kind of thing, but it's not necessarily a warm touch with it. So I think that both kind of, in my opinion, work better to have them both in there.
Okay, Councilmember Vento?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Chambliss, I love what you said about the window dressing. And frankly, I think as it relates to the next part that we're going to get to in terms of what we want to achieve for the region as it relates to being informed and anchored, I really, I hope that there's some way of creating an opportunity in this planning process for the council and the cities and townships and counties to create greater engagement at the neighborhood level. I find it exhausting when I get a call from someone who's upset about a decision that their community has made that has been a part of the planning process for a long time, and they haven't realized it. And they haven't realized it for very good reasons. We don't have the newspaper society we had a long time ago. People tend to get their information off of social media, and sometimes that's part of the nightmare that we're having to live with, because social media isn't always accurate. But our newspapers aren't what they used to be. And more, I find people my age, which kind of shocks me, who don't subscribe to either of the Twin Cities newspapers. And they listen to the evening news occasionally. So what they're getting for news tends to be from that social media. And it's hard for us as an organization and for communities and counties to reach people in a meaningful sort of way and to get their feedback. We don't have letters to the editor. We've got, snarky comments that are sometimes made, but you really can't engage very well that way. So that window dressing, my sister lived in Atlanta for a number of years, and she has often said to me, she said, Sue, at least the people in Atlanta know they're racist. And that's always a wake-up call for me when I hear her say that. She'll say to me, we suffer from Minnesota nice at our own peril, because we're not as nice as we think we are sometimes. Well, not sometimes, often. And it's not just on the issue of race, it's on a whole myriad of issues. If you don't vote the way I do, if your religion isn't the same as mine is, if I don't understand your culture or whatever, we start building walls instead of creating opportunities for communication. So to whatever extent this planning process can help kind of move the dial on that, and it may be real pie in the sky on my part, and I apologize for adding a lot of hot air to this conversation, but I hope for that. I don't know how we do it, but I hope for that. Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been sitting here pondering Councilmember Vento's comments about public health and whatnot, and I'm struggling with that. As a region, we don't really seem to have agreement on what public health and safety are. That, you know, in some places, or some members of the community think that we shouldn't be arresting people or putting them in jail for committing crimes because that's not fair, or, you know, other people think, well, we need to protect the victims and put those people in jail. On the public health side, I've heard from even some of our employees that work with homeless issues on the encampments, when they spring up, people bring food and clothing and all kinds of stuff, and then and sit around with Narcan so they can revive people when they OD and stuff, because that's their version of public health, that immediate harm reduction, where for people who are trying to move those people into a better life, dealing with whatever issues got them there. I mean, those are the sorts of disagreements that are going on, and so I'm not really sure how you bring all of that together to have a regional vision on public health.
If I may, like, I go back to like when we had the reviews of the comp plans experiences from Belle Plaine and Bloomington, where it was interesting to take a concept like equity they both had equity discussions and equity issues, but they were different for each of them. And I think whatever framework we build, it has to kind of be like that, because it's gonna vary by community. I mean, it really, really is. And I think it's not to dictate this is what public health is, but to make sure that maybe it's part of the discussion in the process, kind of like equity was this time. Because both cities did it well, they just did it differently and suited to their community. So that's sort of how I look at it. I don't know if that's right or not.
No, that's a good point.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I really like adding the contextual issues piece in here as we address our vision and our values, because it helps us to kind of stay grounded on what's important about our values. To me, when I see public health, safety, and well-being, that helps us to focus in on the people aspect of our work and that context. So it's kind of it's supporting our values. But I think it is also important to define those contextual issues and also work with our external partners, because we've said many times before that some of the issues that Councilmember Wolf addressed and other issues cannot be resolved solely by the Metropolitan Council, but allow us to work in partnership with other entities. So putting that into context helps us understand why we are partnering and collaborating, I think. But definitely the definition of what those contextual issues mean and their impacts is important. So I'm very glad to see that in this presentation.
All right, any additional comments? Hope you got the information you're needing.
Chair Barber, council members, certainly I did. I appreciate you elaborating on a couple of issues here. One thing that I will add in terms of contextual issues, we may have mentioned to you before that the work that's represented in the regional economic framework will be incorporated into the regional development guide so that it could meet, so that we can contextualize economic issues. And then, you know, of course, it'll also serve as the body of work that required for the Economic Development Administration and the resources that are available from that as a comprehensive economic development strategy. I will say that in that document and in the work of Greater MSP, the issue of being a welcoming and inclusive region is reflected considerably in the 9 strategies in the regional economic framework, particularly with racial inclusion and talent migration and regional brand and image. So I guess there really are 3 very critical strategies for that framework, where the reputation of the region is an issue. or whether, and I was thinking of, before Councilmember Vento brought up the term Minnesota nice, that was certainly on my mind as we were thinking about being an authentically welcoming, inclusive region, and not superficially. So I will proceed to close here. So what I'd like to do now, so we will come back to you in a few weeks to the committee of the whole for a discussion on a draft. And the day before, just FYI, we'll have had a chance to circle back with the Equity Advisory Committee on the 20th. We had met with them back in April, so we're due to kind of give them an update on what's going on, and I'll be able to verbally brief you on any insights or feedback that they might have. And then, so we would like to have a working session with you on the 21st, and then come back with something that's more refined. So having said, I would like, so I have some ideas about how to work with you on the 21st, but I would like to hear from you if you have any suggestions, requests, or advice about how to set that up so that I can support productive discussion for you, and how to set that up so that we can be sort of efficient with that, whether that's background information, whether we work on one issue at a time. But if you have experience with kind of working on shared documents as policymakers that have been effective, or just have general requests about what you might need, think you might need for that session, I'd appreciate hearing that. Or you can, if you have thoughts later, you can always email me.
In touch.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for the good discussion. Next, we're on to our final information item, which is an update on the 2025 Regional Development Guide, Young Leaders Engagement, and we have Darcy Vanderbilt. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Barber, council members. This is the first time I'm getting to meet many of you. My name is Darcy Vandegrift. I am a principal researcher in community development, and this project that I'm coming to talk to you about and hear your ideas about is building off of what Michael just presented. It's an intentional project that is going to be a partnership with young leaders from 6 organizations across the region in order to really dive into visions and values from the perspective of young people and local contexts. And I'm just going to share a little bit with you here this evening. I guess before I jump in, I do want to say that I hope as many of you in community development who worked on CDC and worked with parks and open spaces, that as you finish your 3-year term, that you really see this as part of your legacy as council members. Your input, your insistence on including youth, your rigor around data and equity, kind of all of the feedback that you've offered over the last 3 years really did inform this project, and I welcome continued feedback this evening. So I want to start with the guiding values for this project, and I'm going to ask you. It's a little odd because Michael just gave us, an in-depth discussion about engagement around values. But when I'm talking about guiding values here, I am sharing what are the values that are going to be guiding the engagement with youth in this project that we're going to do. And there's really 5 things that guide us. And so as we're structuring the entire process, some of which we've started and you've participated in. We're really working with these 5 values that we continuously return to. One is to foster youth capacity for civic engagement and policy work. As you know, high school students and post-high school students have a lot of passion and interest and talents in engagement, and so we are wanting to nurture that and foster that among the young leaders that participate. We also want to create cultural change, continued cultural change within the council to build council capacity to really value youth leadership and expertise and experiences. We want to create high-quality, relevant, credible engagement to understand the future of the region. We want to embed equity in the Regional Development Guide process, and when you're looking forward to who are going to be the adults in 2050, when this Regional Development Guide reaches fruition, the young people of the region now are going to be that adult population. And then finally, we want this project to widely share out youth perspectives and have a high level of accountability in communicating to the young leaders who participate how their ideas were heard and incorporated. And so these values are really guiding every step of this project, these early steps we're doing right now to partner with organizations and design the workshops, but also in the outcomes that are created. So for example, this is the last time that I will be appearing alone before the council to talk about the work that we're doing. We are bringing both intern colleagues and also young leaders from the organizations, and they will be doing a lot of the speaking moving forward. So let me tell you a little bit about the structure that we are working on. So this is a collaboration with organizations, and this is an expansion or a kind of an expansion and a reuse of the model that was developed with the Youth and Parks research, which I know a couple of, or at least three council members were present for presentations about that. But it's a model that partners with youth-serving organizations, and in this case, there needs to be within that organization a leadership component. We're seeing the young people in these organizations as comparable to advisory committee kind of level experts and leaders. And as you know, I invited nominations for organizations earlier this, was it a month, over a month, 2 months ago now, and I appreciate those of you who sent in recommendations. But we're working with those 6 organizations, and we're asking them to each recruit between 6 and 10 young leaders who will work continuously. I could talk a lot more about why we're using this organization structure, but that will provide a continuity across the project of collaborating with the organizations. We are also entering our relationship with the organizations as micro-consultants, and that the young leaders will be, they're going to be asked to give about 30 hours of time between the workshops and our meetings together and their research out in the community, and they will be compensated for this time and expertise. And in terms of selecting the organizations, we did receive nominations from council members and also from jurisdictional contacts that we have in our work, and also from, we reached out to pre-existing council relationships as well. And then we did some additional recruitment efforts of reaching out to other organizations that were known from within the council. Another thing, we see every email we send is a relationship building opportunity with community-based organizations, and just because this particular collaboration didn't work out doesn't mean that in the future there isn't an opportunity for engagement around the Regional Development Guide. So we have also, if organizations started in the process with us and then said, well, you know what, we've decided not to apply, we did a debriefing process. How could how could we at the council do better? What kinds of structures would be helpful to you, really kind of hearing what it is that we could do to continue to strengthen these potential for collaboration. And I'm just almost on the cusp of being able to formally announce which organizations will be in partnership, but we're just days away. I wanted it to happen by today, but we wanted to create a low barrier to participation. We didn't want to make this a long application process, so we have a declaration of interest form that organizations could fill out. I will say we have one more round of recruiting. We have 4 organizations in place, and we're recruiting 2 more. So it's not too late if you and we're wanting them to fill out a declaration of interest by December 12th. So if you're thinking, oh, I got your email, but I missed that opportunity, I have an organization in mind, it's not too late. But they filled out a declaration of interest so we could gauge, making sure that we all have the capacity to work on the project during the timeline that we're thinking of. Yes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I've talked a little bit about the organizations. Let's talk about the young leaders that we're working to recruit. So as I mentioned before, we're working to connect with future residents to understand how they're thinking about both the present and their visions and values for the future. And we're seeking an age range of 14 to 24 years old. So that's high school, roughly to the first few years after high school. We're seeking geographic diversity. We want organizations to participate that are from across the region. And to me, this kind of goes back to what Councilmember Vento said of really thinking about how local communities experience what the council does and and thinks about visions and values. So having that geographic diversity will allow us to really understand, kind of capture that intuitive understanding that young people have of their local context and being able to be embedded in the place that they live. We also want we're recruiting a group of young leaders whose demographics reflect the 2050 region, which we know will be 44% people of color, and we want to make sure that the demographics reflect this. We also, as I mentioned earlier, it's a leader-focused engagement. This is an early engagement. This is not the only engagement that the council will be doing to connect with young people around the Regional Development Guide. So we are kind of seeing this as a mirror, community-based mirror process to connecting with advisory councils. A difference being, of course, is that we will be going to where the organization is at. We are not asking the organization and the young leaders to come to Robert Street. Instead, we are going to be working in the spaces where organizations are working. So we'll be in 6 spaces across the region. And we have civic engagement goals of, and to talk about what it is that the council does, to connect. Each organization will learn generally about what the council does, but also connect with a specific system or area within the council: housing, parks, transportation, et cetera. And we're building from a kind of positive youth development approach, which really looks at developing young people's assets, their agency, their ability to make contributions by understanding the systems that govern where they live, and really creating an environment that will support them and enable their participation. And we will have, as Mike, one thing I wanted to add, as Michael noted, that he will have the draft of the visions and values insights, and so we will be able to share that as part of our process with these young leaders and have them reflect and build from there. So let me share just with you a little bit about the timeline. So right now, fall of 2022, imagine that goes through the end of the year is our to make it tidy. But we're doing project scoping. We're doing a lot of relationship building, of connecting with organizations, talking with them. In this next round of recruiting potential partner organizations, we're having webinars. We're doing a lot of one-on-one communication. And also those debriefs, I think, are an important part of the relationship building. The organizations will be selected and notified by the end of very soon, as soon as I get one last internal piece, proverbial duck in a row. And then we will be hiring the interns who will start, intern colleagues will start in January. We have an amazing pool of university students from community colleges, four-year colleges, graduate students who are applying to join this team, and they are dynamite. I'm really excited for you to meet them next year. So we're getting those kind of internal pieces in place, and then in winter, we will be starting workshops with each of the organization. One thing to make clear is that each organization is going to work separately for logistical reasons, and we're hoping to have some virtual convenings of all of them together by the end, and that will allow them to really dive into depth into working together. And they're going to do a diverse array of activities. They're going to be some of the things that you do, looking at data and reflecting on it, talking to stakeholders in their community, doing interviews with community members. There will be some organizations, if it's the right fit, there will be arts-based engagement. A lot of, if you know me, you know that I'm a sociologist, data-based engagements, and also meeting staff from the council and learning about the work that they do and the systems that they're a part of. And then we'll also have, and this is really important because this is a pilot project where we're wanting to create cultural change within the council and across the region, a lot of space for reflection and about what worked, what didn't, kind of working to grow ourselves in addition to working with the young leaders. In spring, we are going to have that cross-organization convening. We will be creating opportunities for young leaders to present. We're considering, we really want to think about like what would already, like what's the next step? What are ways to kind of build on what you said, Councilmember Gonzalez? How do we create permanent changes? So what are the ways that council structure could invite young people's participation in addition to this very in-depth intensive pilot process? What are some kind of long-term sustainable ways? And thinking about as we're building that, like what might a summer leadership workshop look like where we could envision and dream some of those ideas? And again, that space for debrief and reflection. And then finally in summer 2023, we will publish an in-depth analysis of this and present findings to council stakeholders, and I really do mean we, my intern colleagues and young leaders who have participated, and also returning back to the leaders in the organizations to demonstrate how their findings informed this early stage. And this will not, because the policy plan, the regional development guide is a long process, we will need to go back again and share with them some of those results, and also set expectations that if we're setting a plan in place that's going to go until 2050, we're not going to know all of the outcomes of how their input was used. But we do create that accountability of going back and talking with them and getting their feedback on how they thought it went, and also sharing how we heard and listened to their advice. I just wanted to share really quickly, I apologize for the very fine print, some of the workshop topics and activities. At a very high level, it's really starting from where are we right now to envisioning into the future. So what is the current reality? And that's where you look at data, where you talk to people in your community, where you make observations about the community around you. We're not asking young leaders to be experts on the entire 7-county region. We really want to hear from their in-depth knowledge of the context where they are from, what it is that they are seeing. We're going to be thinking, and that the result of that first step is just describing the current reality. How do you understand where we are right now? Then we would talk about, what values should guide the region into the future. So from the current reality they described, what values do they see embedded in that articulation of the present? How do they prioritize those values? And then there will be a result of identifying those values and then reflecting on the process. And then after we've talked about the present and what values are, kind of should guide the region into the future, if we have these values, what would the region look like given these values? So what would a successful region look like? Who needs to be involved in creating that successful region? What are the highest priorities? And then finally, throughout this, we'll be talking about what is it that the council does, and that's where we talk about, what should we do together to help build this future? How can what the council does help realize the future that young people are articulating? And that the result is creating a policy vision recommendations. To conclude, the workshops will begin in February 2023. We will be tailoring this process. There will be some kind of outcomes or goals in common, but we found in the Youth and Parks research, it's really important to tailor activities to what it is that the organization and the young people in that organization want to get from their participation. So we will be having kind of some preliminary meetings to talk to them. We're going to begin in February. The second group will begin at the begin in March, and then we will return to the council with young leaders in April 2023 to share early results and reflection. Thank you for your interest, and I really welcome any advice or feedback that you might have.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Stern.
Thank you. My question has to be like, how extensive are we doing these youth groups and that? Because there's quite a few like youth groups that work on leadership out there that are already there. Like the Minnesota Youth Collective.
Mm-hmm.
So is it like, do we have a wide range of net out there talking to youth groups, or are we going to focus on a few?
We do have a wide range. The organization you mentioned, I have been in contact with them. They're attending a webinar, but it includes public school organizations, rural leadership development groups, affinity-based leadership development groups. Church organizations have expressed interest. We have really cast the net. I think we worked to count up that we've contacted 127 organizations in our process. And of course, I do welcome, it's not too late if you wanted to send me an email with an additional nomination, which is, we could reach out to more.
Okay, thank you.
All right, additional comments or questions? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. I just had opportunities to work with young folks at the Minneapolis Public School, which is where I work. One of the things that I found is that if we are asking them, the students, their advice on a particular topic that we think is important, most likely they're going to bring up issues that they believe are even more important. So when we're doing that conversation, I think it's very important for us to take those off-topic issues into consideration and also do some type of follow-up. Quick example, I was discussing an issue with students at one of our high schools about discrimination and how we can address that inside the school district. But their main concern was from the students how they can obtain driver's license for their parents because due to their immigration status, many of them were not eligible. Now, of course, Minneapolis school districts have no say on changing Minnesota driver's license laws. So the easy follow-up for me to say is, we don't work with that, so I'm not gonna do anything with your concerns. The proper response would have been to collect that information, do some type of follow-up, and then let the students know what that follow-up is. Now, if we don't want to do the second part of taking the off-topic issues and doing follow-up, at least we should tell them from the beginning that we're just going to be discussing this set of issues and nothing else because we don't have jurisdiction for anything that is outside these parameters. What I found that was unproductive was asking for their input, and then when they give us their input, saying there's nothing we can do with that. So either clarify the scope or develop a way in which those off-topic issues can be put forward to somebody that can do something about it, or at least issue a response.
Chair Barber and Councilmember Gonzalez, I completely agree. And it's sort of that tension between really listening to young people with accountability and making sure that we create credible, relevant input that decision makers can use. And our philosophy at this point is to really begin broadly where young people can, and the benefit of having the large team of intern colleagues, because I'll have 5 colleagues working with me, is that we do not let that listening go. You know, we take the listening seriously. We capture everything, we document everything, and we share it out, and then we introduce sort of the policy areas of the council. And I think that if I can humbly make the observation that sometimes what we see as what is council purview shifts, like your conversation about public health this evening, you know, and so I think that nothing, we lose if we say, oh, that's outside of the purview, but we do have to be clear about what council authorities are. But that doesn't mean that we don't listen to other pieces. But I really appreciate you bringing up that tension because it is indeed a tension.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions? I would just say thank you, and I appreciate hearing about this, and I really do appreciate that you also factored in and made a point of factoring in the geographic balance of rural, suburban, and urban. I think that's key to the discussion too. So, so I'm very happy to see that part of it. All right. With that, thank you very much. So now we're on to reports. So do council members have any reports they'd like to share? All right. Regional Administrator?
I'll pass.
All right. General Counsel?
Yes, I just wanted to announce that Governor Walz appointed our former OGC colleague, Sydney Woods, to be a judge in Hennepin County. So we're very proud of her and wish her the best, and I thought you all should be aware of that.
Thank you very much. All right. Is there any other business? All right. Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.